Hi everybody, my name is Todd Brandon. I am the Accidental Excelist, and in this video we're going to take a look at the offset function. As you can see here on the screen, the offset function is just a simple function with 5 arguments. 2 of those are optional arguments as denoted by the square brackets, height and width, and we'll get to that in a little bit. But I want to start off just kind of demonstrating what the offset function is using the 3 required arguments, the reference, the rows, and columns. So here's your basic syntax. So what the offset function does in a nutshell is it takes a reference, and based on the number of rows or columns you give it in the function or the formula itself, in the rows and columns arguments, you're going to move that many rows or that many columns from the original reference. Now, rows and columns can be either positive numbers or negative numbers depending on your reference. So if your reference is like your home cell, A1, right? You wouldn't use negative values for your rows or columns because negative values refer to rows up from the reference and columns to the left, whereas positive is down and to the right. So if you're in cell A1, and you put a negative value in there, you're going to throw an error because you can't go to the left or upward from cell A1. So let's think about this. So for example, with A1 as our reference, if we want to return a value or return the value from, let's say, cell B2. We would use cell A1 as our reference in the offset function, and then we would supply it with arguments for rows and columns that would be 1, positive 1 for each. And so what that means is we want to go down 1 row from cell A1, we want to go to the right 1 column, which would put us at row 2 and column B. So it would be B2, and I believe that's what I said in the original example. So without further ado, let's check it out. Let's get into some basic examples and see this in action. All right, so what I've got here in this worksheet is a range of cells from A1 to E10, sorry. And so what I've done is place values in each of those that shows you what row and what column each cell is on. So if I go down to cell A2, that's row 2, column 1, row 3, column 1, and so on. And I've done that here as well. So if you go all the way down to cell E10, we're on row 10, column 5. And so this is going to really help as we start to play around with the offset function to see what it returns. So what I'm going to do is go to cell C12 here, and I'll start typing the offset formula. And as I start typing OF, you see it come up there. And since it's already showing, I can hit tab, or I can type out the whole thing. And you don't have to capitalize this. It'll go ahead and automatically capitalize the actual name of the function for you. But once I go ahead and hit tab or open my parentheses, I can see all the arguments. I can see the syntax that it requires. So it's references in bold because that's the argument that we need to work with right now. That's the argument it's asking us for. So I'm going to go up here, and I'm going to click on cell A1. And then if I hit my comma, it now bolds the rows argument. So if I wanted to go down to row 2, I would say 1 would be my rows argument because I want to go down 1 from the reference, which is A1. And so I'm going to go ahead and do that. I'm going to supply 0 for columns just to keep this simple. So I don't want to move any columns. We just want to go down 1 row and see what happens. And what I've done is put in a little clever conditional formatting here. So it's going to highlight the cell that this will match. And if I hit enter, that's row 2, column 1. And you can see it here in our range, or our matrix, if you will. So let's keep things simple. And I'll go ahead and type equals OF tab, and then I'm going to use A1 as my reference again, and then this time I'm going to supply a rows argument of 0, so we stay on the same row, and then a columns argument of 1 to move over to the right one. When I hit enter, it's going to go to cell B1, which we can see here is row 1, column 2. So you can kind of get the idea already. If I went back to this cell, I'm going to go ahead and change this. I'm going to click into the formula. I'm going to put 1 for our rows argument, and see what happens. And like we should expect, that's going to go to cell B2, which is one row down and one column to the right from cell A1. Let's look at a situation where we use, say for instance, we're going to use cell E10 as our reference. So I'll double click on that A1 real quick, make things easy, highlight that, and I'll go ahead and click on cell E10, and that replaces that. As I was telling you before we got into this, if you were to select cell A1 and you were to put any negative values for your arguments, you're going to get an error because you can't go up any rows or to the left any columns from A1. So let's go back to cell A1, use that as our reference, and I'm going to show you what happens if we try to go up one row from cell A1, what we'll get. Remember I told you would get an error because you can't go up any further from cell A1. So when I hit enter, I do get the ref error. So you need to be cognizant of what your reference is, and then kind of have an idea of why you might get an error for the offset function. So now let's change our cell reference and look at a different kind of example. So I'm going to double click on A1, highlight that, and I'm going to click into cell E10 to change that reference argument. And I'm going to leave it the way it is because this will actually be a good example. So in this case, we're going to go to one cell up from E10, but we're going to stay in the same column. We'll leave that column argument at 0, and I'll go ahead and click enter, and sure enough we get the result row 9 column 5 as we're actually getting the value from cell E9. So let's go back to that and let's see what happens. Considering we're on row 10 and column 5, let's say -9 for our rows reference, and then -4 for our column reference. So let's hit enter, and sure enough we get the value that's in cell A1 because we went 9 rows up from cell E10 and 4 rows to the left of cell E10, and we get row 1 column 1. So that should give you a pretty good sense of the basic functionality of using the offset function with just the rows and columns arguments. Thanks everybody for watching. Please take a minute to like and subscribe, and be sure to check us out at theaccidentalexcellist.com.